Hello there, you're watching the press preview, a first look at what is on the front pages as they arrive. And in the next half hour, we'll see what's making the headlines with the economics correspondent at the Spectator, Kate Andrews, and the deputy online editor for the new Statesman, Rachel Cunliffe. Thanks, both of you, very much for joining us. Let's see what's on the front of some of those newspapers. The Prime Minister is urging everyone to get a COVID vaccine over fears the spread of the Indian variant of the virus is being fuelled by those who've refused the jab. That is the front of the Telegraph. Boris Johnson's words are also on the front of the Express, who says the relaxation of the rules should be met with a heavy dose of caution. The Sun celebrates both the success of the vaccines and against the variant and the return of indoor drinking from tomorrow. Don't blow at Britain, says the Mail. Health experts have told The Guardian that people should ignore the easing of restrictions and continue to socialise outside. Foreign travel plans are in chaos, according to The Times, after Health Secretary Matt Hancock said Britons should not travel to amber list countries. The Star says Britain's plan to savour plays and work of art as lockdown restrictions ease. Metro claims to be Britain's biggest national weekday newspaper again, now that lockdown is being lifted. And the Financial Times leads with news of a potential deal by the American firm AT&T to combine Warner Media with Discovery, a move that could challenge Netflix dominance in the streaming arena. Well, let's get more on those papers with Kate Andrews and Rachel Cunliffe. And Kate, we're going to kick off with you, and it's on the front of most of the front pages, the re-easing of restrictions tomorrow. Lots of people looking forward to it, it seems.
Yes, it's on nearly every front page. The next step in the Prime Minister's roadmap has gotten the green light in England. This means that restrictions on indoor and outdoor socializing are easing. Up to 30 can meet outside, 6 people or 2 households indoors, as well as indoor hospitality reopening, hotels, cinemas, theatres, and the like. In Scotland and Wales, across the UK, the rules are slightly different. Wales is moving slower on indoor socializing, for example, but they are moving down to alert level 2. So tomorrow's a big easing day across the UK. Many will be looking forward to it, but also an important reminder that this is by no means back to normal, and hospitality is already being very loud about the fact that if we can't get to the 21st of June and essentially have all of these restrictions lift, they simply won't be able to turn a profit. So, wonderful to be able to host people inside for a cup of tea now outside of your bubble, but by no means back to where we were pre-pandemic.
Rachel, do you think that we will all be eager to get out? Because once we could socialise outside, everybody seemed very keen to do that. We saw a lot of footage of some of the pubs in the centre of London being really, really busy outside. But the weather hasn't been great over the last few weeks. Do you think we've all slightly fallen out of love with socialising a little bit?
I think re-entry anxiety, as it's called, is definitely a real thing. I think we've been living under very, very strange conditions for the last year. And I do think that people's social circles or sense of socialisation has contracted somewhat. Certainly, I think about my social life 2 years ago and the number of people I was seeing and the amount I was doing, and it just seems exhausting now. I can manage sort of one piece of socializing, one trip to a bar or a restaurant a week now. I'm hoping that as people start to feel a bit more secure and as the restrictions ease and we sort of slide back into normality, some of that will come back. Although, as Kate said, it's far from normal. It's as normal as it was over the summer, but still, many of the live events or big crowds, that's not coming back. Certainly not until the end of June. And I do think that people's feeling about those large mass events, there probably will be some residual insecurity and some residual nervousness and anxiety there, as I think is totally natural. But what I'm really looking forward to this week, we focus a lot on hospitality, is the fact that for the first time in basically 6 months, it's not illegal to go round to somebody's house for a cup of tea. And those home settings, particularly for families and for small groups of friends, that I think is something that's really important. And that is where a lot of people will have felt the lack of socialisation the most over the winter.
Yeah, it is interesting, isn't it, Kate, that the Sun is focusing on shots, but a lot of the papers over the last couple of days have been focusing on hugs. And that does seem to be, that human contact seems to be one of the things that has been missed the most during this lockdown.
Well, certainly, it's different for everybody, of course, what they prioritize. And the Sun's pun there, which is also picked up in the Daily Telegraph in a slightly more serious tone, is that we're talking about two different kinds of shots, not just the kinds you might take at a bar, but the fact that the Prime Minister is now putting the emphasis on the jabs to get us through this crisis. And we should note this is a big change in tone from the Prime Minister and his officials. There was a real attempt just weeks ago to try to get people to continue to obey all the lockdown rules, to emphasize that the jabs weren't 100% effective. He was insistent that 2 fully jabbed people still couldn't meet indoors. And we really saw a shift last Friday in the press conference. Now they're saying, please get your jab. We need to prioritize getting vaccines because that is the way out. And of course, that is the right message. Vaccines work. And that is why we are now moving to this next step where we can all take more personal choice and responsibility about who we hug, who we're near, who we're inside with, who we're still slightly more careful around, because the most vulnerable and the elderly now in this country have been offered their first jab. Indeed, millions have had their second jab. We are in a much safer place than we ever were last year coming in and out of lockdowns. And that's what's enabled this next step so that we can all have a little more say and decision and do our own risk assessment when we decide who we see and how we see them.
And Rachel, at The Guardian's front page, its headline, Britain's open up, but experts warn public to stick to meeting outdoors. It's fair enough if it's a nice day, but, it will be nice to be able to shelter, won't it?
Well, this is exactly what Kate was saying, and I think she's absolutely right, that if you want more people to take the vaccine, you want vaccine rates to be as high as possible, you have to push the message that vaccines work and just talk about how miraculous they are. And also making the front pages in some of those that we've already discussed is the fact that there's been so much concern over the Indian variant, which it looks like is significantly more transmissible than other strains. However, the existing vaccines we have work against that and protect people against that. And that's really important. And the messaging from the government over the past few months that, yes, get vaccinated, but just be very careful just in case because it doesn't give you as much protection as you think it does, I think may have done some real damage to vaccine uptake. And now I think that the change in tone, saying this is what you need to do in order to protect yourself and protect others, is really valuable. Whereas these warnings from scientists in The Guardian, which are very valid, firstly talking about how transmission is much lower outdoors, which we know that it is, and obviously, as you say, if it's a sunny day, I think people may feel that it is less of a risk and indeed more pleasant to continue socialising outside. But you have to balance that risk-averse scientific message with the very positive message that there is a step you can take in order to reduce your risk and the risk of others, and that is getting vaccinated. And separating those two messages and focusing on the pro-vaccine one is, I think, the way forward if you want to make sure that the people who have been reluctant to get vaccinated so far really do see the benefits.
And Kate, we look at the Telegraph again, that same message, play your part to beat the variant, the PM urges the public. Do you think the possibility of going away on summer holiday might sharpen the minds and the focus of people who were a little bit ambivalent towards having vaccines before now?
Well, look, I think a lot can help sway hearts and minds. Your neighbors and friends around you getting vaccinated and having positive experiences, thinking about the opportunity to be safe as we head indoors, as you might get on a plane. All of that's hopefully encouraging people to get the vaccine. But let's not take for granted that Britain continues to poll as one of the top countries in the world that's keen to get its vaccine. You have people who are absolutely desperate to get it, who are just waiting to get their text. That's all really positive. Now, we need those education campaigns to help encourage people who are still hesitant about it, about the real great reasons why you might get your vaccine. At the moment, those in Bolton who are in hospital suffering with the Indian variant, the vast majority of them did have the opportunity to get the vaccine and turned it down. And that's very sad. We want to avoid situations like that as much as we can. But overall, there is huge desire for uptake. And this is really encouraging for the UK. It's the reason that we're able to keep taking the steps that we are to reopening, because the vast majority of vulnerable and elderly are now jabbed. And as I said before, it's a very different set of circumstances now. And whilst I do appreciate that, if you want to be extremely cautious, it is certainly the case that you're much less likely to spread this virus outdoors, which is what the scientists and professors on the front page of The Guardian are talking about. But there have been serious trade-offs to not being able to have indoor economic and socializing activity. And now it's up to the individual to decide if that trade-off is worth it anymore.
Kate and Rachel, we're going to take a short break. Coming up, Palestinian activists' slurs condemned. That is on the front page of The Telegraph.
we call this a smartphone, but actually using it as a phone is just a small proportion of what we do with it. So our argument is we need to understand this as something bigger than that. And we start by saying, think of it more as a place within which you live. I mean, you spend so much time there, you're sort of organizing your life there, socializing with people. And that sounds positive, but one of the consequences of that is that you might think, the person next door to you when you're sort of having a meal together is with you, but it's just so easy to take this out from your pocket and suddenly they've gone home. They've gone to that smartphone home, and they're completely oblivious to you being next to them. This is something that may actually vary from country to country. You're absolutely right that I would think in the UK, it's all going to be older people saying, these younger people, they were supposed to be with me and they're spending all their time on the smartphone. Now, actually, the researcher in Shanghai found that sometimes it was the other way around, because older people in China, they associate with the kind of national project of being in the vanguard of IT. And they have perhaps a more positive association then with the phones. And you'll sometimes see that it's, the young people going with them to a restaurant and saying, Grandma, I thought we were taking you out for a nice meal, and how come you're spending all your time on the smartphone? But what are they actually doing on their smartphones? And much of the time, they're on WhatsApp, perhaps the most important of apps to us these days, or, they're with other people. So it's not necessarily an antisocial device. It may be rude to the person next to you, but actually they may be talking to somebody in a different country, or somebody who, needs their attention and their care, an elderly parent. So the social life that is being now created through the smartphone can often be enormously positive and goes beyond what was possible before. And I think, again, you're right, that if there's one period when that's become really clear to us, it's been over the last year. Because, everyone says, we miss the hugs, we miss the face-to-face, but then they say, what if we'd spent the last year without things like the smartphone? It's too horrible even to imagine.
Hello, my name is Ina Braverman and I'm the founder and CEO of Wave Power. I believe that wave power, which can produce twice the amount of electricity that the world produces now, is definitely a great cause.
I grew up seeing the impacts of climate change firsthand. Having to be afraid of drowning in my own bedroom and sometimes waking up in the middle of the night with floodwater in my room. We needed an organization that specifically talked about the climate. And so me and my friends, we decided to put up Youth Advocates for Climate Action Philippines. I had to join the fight.
Welcome back. You're watching the press preview. With me now, Kate Andrews and Rachel Cunliffe. And we're returning to the Daily Telegraph for the story we've been covering this evening here on Sky News. This was a bunch of people in cars in London driving through St John's Wood and shouting awful statements. Rachel, it's rightly made the papers, but we understand that there have been some arrests this evening as well.
There have been some arrests. This is quite an emotional one for me to discuss because it's about 15 minutes away from where I live, and it referred to the shouts referred to raping Jewish girls. So that unfortunately includes me in that, and it has really sort of sent shockwaves through the Jewish community. The condemnation from the Prime Minister and other political leaders has been swift, and as you say, people have been arrested for this. But this shift in the way that we've been talking about the Middle East and what's going on in Israel and Palestine as an issue that somehow is the responsibility of Jews here in the UK is something that is incredibly damaging and disturbing, because there is a huge range of opinion among the Jewish community in the UK, the vast majority of whom absolutely are appalled at what is going on in Gaza and Israel, and many of whom actively oppose Netanyahu and the behaviour of the Israeli government. But it is this kind of rhetoric that blames what is going on in a country very, very far away on the Jewish community here, of people who have absolutely nothing to do with it, that is going to cement in the minds of many Jews that there really does need to be a Jewish state, because we can be made to feel very unsafe in our own country for something that has absolutely nothing to do with us.
And Kate, the FT's front page is about the UN Security Council as well, and it's condemned the violence and says that it hopes that both sides can reach a resolution. But the UN doesn't really have a brilliant record of actually achieving a great deal in that part of the world, does it? There's always lots of words and lots of strong sentiments, but very little action.
Well, exactly. Although this week I do think that a big story is going to be the ramping up of international efforts to try to stop what is one of the worst conflicts we've seen between Israel and Palestine for some years now. It doesn't look like it's winding down. We have nearly 200 deaths in Gaza. We have at least 10 in Israel, many innocent people dying. And so I do think you're going to see a ramp up from the international community. Just to echo Rachel's words, though, very sadly here in the UK, where we have seen too many instances of anti-Semitism in recent years. These so-called activists, don't need any kind of excuse. Their main goal here is just to promote anti-Semitic rhetoric, and it's awful and disgusting, and something that has been condemned across the board today, and it's positive to see. But the fact that it happens in the first place, and the fact that the Jewish community has to live with this in the UK in 2021 is truly a disgrace, and there's no excuse for it. So thank goodness action is going to be taken, and hopefully swiftly as well. But really sad scenes in North London today, and Rachel, I'm sorry it happened so close to your home.